Hello, Blue Jays fans, and welcome to episode 276 of the Jays from the Couch radio podcast, brought to you by, of course, JaysFromTheCouch.com. We're glad you're tuning in for another week to catch our podcast, whether it's on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, catching the live version where you get to see our beautiful faces, spout poetic about the Toronto Blue Jays. Thank you for all of your support there. And if you missed it, if you couldn't tune into, or you're not a video format kind of person, don't worry. We've got the audio version available anywhere you find quality podcasts. Emphasis on the quality, of course. I'm your host, as always, Sean Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter at Doyle JFtC. We've got a great episode for you. And, of course, with me, as always, Karen Suter, host of Sunny Side of the Dome, Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Good evening, Karen.
Good evening, Sean.
And host of the On Fact Circle, Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, the feckless wonder himself. Steve, how are you?
Fine, Sean. Hi, Karen. Hey, we don't want to start too soon. We need to cue in all the other sites. Start recording now.
If there's anybody out there who's looking for ideas to write about, you've come to the right place.
Right place, yes, absolutely,
yes. Anyway, it's a great episode, and I'm really excited about this one because we're going to talk about some award winners here. The season is over, and the playoffs are going on, and nobody cares. So we're gonna talk about some exciting Blue Jays stuff here. We've got potential award winners, I should say. And of course, we're bringing back our fake Blue Jays news segment because, oh man, it is just so much fun. And I will never do a podcast without them. In fact, I randomly, when I'm driving, I come up with fake Blue Jays stuff and I'm like, oh, I got to write that down. And then I forget it. And then I have to come up with others. But anyway, let's first of all, we're going to start with the possibles. Okay, the big ticket awards. This coming up shortly. You've got Cy Young. Let's start there for the best pitcher in each league. Now, typically, voters of this award, I really believe it's too bad that players aren't a massive part of this voting, because I think it would go much differently. But anyway, so for the Cy Young, best pitcher in the American League, and how voters, I guess, define best pitcher remains to be seen. But do they look at the back of the baseball card stats? Do they look at all the advanced? Who knows, right? But I'm going to start with you, Karen. You know Robbie Ray is right there in contention just because, regardless of whatever metric you want to use, he's been one of the best pitchers in the American League. So, Karen, I guess my question is, does he win it?
I think so. I mean, it was him, Garrett Cole, and I imagine earlier in the season, Lance Lynn was probably one of the front runners. But then I don't know what happened with him. He missed some time with injury, or his performance just kind of backslided. And Cole, oh my God, after signing that massive contract, he just has not looked like the same pitcher. I mean, not that I'm upset, because I'm most definitely not a Yankees fan, but yeah. I think going into the season, Robbie Ray, for the most part, just kept getting stronger and stronger. Yeah. And some of his closest competition for the AL Cy Young Award was going in the opposite direction. So I think it's his. Yeah,
and Garrett Cole, oh, man. I'm so happy because he's not going to win it. And all of these people, and of course, Rob Manfred is throwing a tantrum as we speak, watching this at home. But, all of the hoopla, if you will. And here's Robbie Ray. So, Steve, I'm going to ask you, when you look at, and Karen did a great job of, who was in the mix, but are you, Steve, is your thinking that Garrett Cole and Lance Lynn have kind of played themselves out of contention, and really it's a no-brainer, and it's Robbie Ray.
I don't know. I think Lance Lynn may have pitched his way out of contention in September. Garrett Cole, you have the natural let's support the Yankees bias in the media in a lot of ways. I think a lot of sports writers are smart enough to know that for a little while, Gary Sanchez was catching him and not Kyle Higashioka or whatever his name is. And I think that made a huge difference. But Robbie Ray just kept getting better. And it is a 162 game full season award. And he could really be an MVP candidate. In other years, he would get serious MVP consideration, I think, because without him, I don't know where the Blue Jays would have been.
Right. Karen, you wanted to jump in?
Yes. Steve, are you good? Are you still talking? Or I don't want to cut you off.
Well, no, because most people do in my life. So, I mean, we're family, so I don't mind. No, I'm done. I'm done.
When you talk about the pro-New York bias, it reminds me of 1996 when the AL Cy Young Award was between Andy Pettitte of the Yankees and Pat Henkin of the Blue Jays. And there was talk about, and basically Pettitte had one more win. He had 21 wins and Henkin got win number 20 on the last day of the season. But other than that, like every other metric that you can measure a pitcher by was all Henkin. And there was some speculation that Pettitte would win because of this pro-New York bias. And there was someone, a newspaper columnist, it might even have been Richard Griffin, I don't remember for sure, but it was someone with a regular column in a major newspaper that wrote about baseball. And he said, trust me, folks, there is no pro-Yankee bias within the voters. And sure enough, it was Henkin who won. So fingers crossed. I mean, outside of New York itself, like does everybody who is not in New York, who is not specifically a Yankees fan or covering the Yankees, does everybody else just love the Yankees to death?
I don't know that it's that. Keep in mind that a lot of the national television and radio correspondents are based in New York. You know, the Rosenthals and Tom Verducci and people like that all are based out of New York. So I think they just get inundated with so much information, you know, Yankees, Mets. I think that does unconsciously color their approach to things. And coming from having grown up in the New York, New Jersey area, I can see it. I mean, I can see why. I mean, I didn't even know when I was a little kid that there were teams in certain cities because they never talked about it. It was the Yankees and the Mets. And you might get a Red Sox mention or a Phillies mention. But I mean, really, it's just how it is. And I think it's just a subconscious, unconscious thing with these national writers that they get the brainwash.
Like, isn't the voting, and I don't know, maybe it's changed, but I thought the voting was 2 writers per city that has a major league team. So it's not like it's 10 writers out of New York and 10 out of everybody else combined. So,
yeah, but there are national media people, writers, like for people like with The Athletic and things like that do get votes, and they rotate through. So they won't get a vote in all the categories. But let's say Rosenthal gets a Cy Young vote, and maybe Morosi or someone else or Verducci gets a vote in some of the other, like Manager of the Year or whatever it would be. So that's where I think some of the subliminal influences come through as far as a New York bias.
So let's actually take a look then, right? Robbie Ray, 32 starts. First of all, Steve, this is kind of fits under your like MVP type thinking that he made every start. Mm-hmm. 193 innings. So, but I think the 200 inning benchmark is long gone. Those days are long over. You know, you don't have Roy Halladay's anymore. guys going 9 innings, like 10 times a season. You're lucky if you get 1 time a season. And even then, I don't think I'd have to go check. I would be shocked if there were 5 complete games in all of baseball in 2021. I will check. ERA 284, 3.9 wins above replacement. Now, we talked about his his walks, right? Coming from Arizona, where he led the planet in walks. He single-handedly put steps on everybody's Apple Watch, right? Because they get to walk to first base. That was a poor joke. I apologize. Anyway, trust me, I've got better. Okay, but he brought his walks down to 2.47 per 9 innings, which is huge, right? And then, of course, 11.54, which ironically is the lowest mark of his career since 2016. So he actually
11.54. What's that?
Strikeouts per 9 innings. Yeah, yeah. So now let's just I don't know, flip over to Mr. Cole and just take a look, just for the fun of it, because I want to. 30 starts. That's less than 32, I think. 181 innings. Ooh, that's less than Robbie Ray. Huh. ERA, higher. Yikes. Man. It's like, now he does have better strikeouts per 9 innings at 12.06 and 2.03 walks per 9. So it's going to be interesting, but I really think that the recency bias will play into that. And Garrett Cole had some poor starts at the end of the season, even though Robbie Ray on September 30th gave up 5. I just feel like Garrett Cole has pitched his way out of it. Time will tell, of course. I could be wrong. Lord knows I have been wrong in the past, and I've been told that anyway. Who knows if it's true? But let's move into another award. And Steve, you kind of mentioned it, so I'm going to start with you because this is going to get you fired up. But when a manager can lose almost 100 games, and then in the very next season, regardless of it being 60 games, takes his team to the playoffs. Then in the next season, which is a full season, he finishes 20 games above 500. And if not for the American League East being what it is, 4 teams with over 90 wins, the Toronto Blue Jays would be in the playoffs. So, Steve, my question to you is Charlie Montoyo manager of the year?
No.
Because?
And that's not because of anything that Charlie necessarily did or didn't do during the season. I mean, I've had to swallow some bitter pills here saying that he really did a great job keeping this team together throughout the year through some very tough times. There are just 2 managers that have done just such an amazing job this year. They're just more worthy, and that's Alex Cora and Scott Servais in Seattle. Scott Servais had to navigate a lot more bumpy, pothole-filled roads than Charlie did this year, even with the injuries.
And he was given a Chevette to drive.
Yeah, exactly. And no, I better not say what I was going to think. He certainly is a manager of the year candidate. And I think Alex Cora has proven what a great manager that he is. Because this is, in many ways, the same team that was just brutal last year. And he just has a way of rallying the troops and getting them to buy into whatever the plan is. I think Alex Cora's manager of the year, hands down. But Servais, I think, would be close. And again, that's not a knock on Charlie. But
all right.
I just don't see how he's going to even be a finalist. Because I would venture to say you're going to get the Kevin Cash people and even the Dusty Baker people that are going to be, and dare I say, AJ Hinch in Detroit. What he did with that team, he's also worthy of Manager of the Year consideration. But I think it's between Cora and Service.
Interesting. All right. So, Karen, I'm going to turn it over to you so Steve can check his Apple Watch for the notification of a deposit from Alex Cora. So, Karen, in all honesty, I know that you feel that Charlie Montoyo, I don't want to speak for you, put words in your mouth, but I know you feel he deserves credit. So, if it were up to you, where does he land in this Manager of the Year discussion?
Right. I think he's top 3 again. I agree, unfortunately, that I don't think he'll be the winner. I believe the winner will be a manager of one of the 5 teams that actually did make it to the playoffs. But I think Montoyo deserves a lot of credit for the reasons that you said, that, in 2 years, they've gone from a 95 loss team to a 91 win team that really should have made the playoffs. And I mean, Scott Service, okay, great, but I'm sorry, you can't tell me that anybody had more obstacles than Charlie Montoyo and the Blue Jays. They had 3 darn homes this year, for Pete's sake. I mean, on that point alone. And I mean, they went a little bit further than the Mariners. Neither of them did make it to the playoffs. Credit to Scott Service for what he did with what he had to work with, as well as AJ Hinch. Alex Cora, I mean, I don't know, maybe he'll win. I'm not sold on him as a great manager, and maybe he is. But, you look at the facts are that last year the Boston Red Sox were a last place team, even worse than the Baltimore Orioles. And this year, here they are in the ALCS now that Alex Cora is back. Is he the difference maker? And if so, why? There's nothing that I know about or can prove, but we know about his past on 2 different teams. So, Steve, I know you don't buy into that, but in any case, but bottom line, circling back to the question that we were asked, I think Montoyo was top 3 again this year. I don't think he'll be Manager of the Year, not this year. He will next year when they make the playoffs.
And let's be real, Charlie Montoyo had other obstacles as well. I mean, he started the year with Tanner Roark, right? So, there's that
just
one.
That whole bullpen disaster, like the turnover that this team has gone through, and the improvements that they made. And like, even looking at the guys that started the year with the Jays and finished the year with the Jays, look at how many of them actually improved from day 1 to day 162.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think Charlie probably deserves a lot of credit for the improvements that these young kids have made, right? And I would love to be a fly on the wall, because I really believe that a manager, like that's Tony La Russa managing the White Sox, like, you could do that in your sleep. They were a good team. Some teams John Gibbons was a great manager for those kind of teams that don't really need a manager. Wow, that sounded more harsh than I meant, but but a manager who can take a young team and mold them into and make the progressions that we've seen in this Blue Jays team. And he may not get credit this season for that, and he may not get an award because of it, but I think there's a huge amount of hat tipping that we should do to Charlie Montoyo just on that note alone, right? Because it cannot be easy to teach kids how to be Major League Baseball players while you're winning, while you're fighting for a playoff spot, while you know what I mean? So I think there's that. And I have to throw this up there, not because I agree, but clearly Matt Sweeby is watching on YouTube. And I hope, Matt, that you're watching on your couch, because if you're driving, clearly you're drinking. If you think I'm looking clean and sharp today, something wrong with your eyesight, Matt. I love you, and I appreciate you tuning in every week and always having a comment for us. But it may be time to stop the drinking, bud. Of course, I kid. I appreciate it, Matt. Thank you very much. I'll make sure I tell my wife. Matt says I look good tonight. Hey. All right. Before we get See, Matt just threw me off. I'm blushing. And woo, if you're listening to the audio version of the podcast, you do not get to see me turn into a tomato because, anyway. Oh, Matt's back. I bet you. Watch. Oh, now he's just going to make me cry. Matt says I'm a beautiful man and I need to accept it. Matt, where would I be without you? I'm going to carry you around in my pocket, Matt. That's what I'm going to do. My daily affirmation.
Are we on The Bachelor or The Bachelorette or something? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, well, what kind of show is
I thought
this?
this was Blue Jays baseball talk.
All right.
I'm a bitter old man that looks like a 10,000 miles of bad road. I mean, I don't get this whole thing. Okay.
So I'm just going to let Karen and Steve go, and Matt and I will continue on okay, for some alone time. All right. But before we get into the fake news, the fake Blue Jays news, we should probably talk about the most valuable player in the American League. And Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and we've talked about it before, and so many people have talked about the contributions of Vlad this season. Karen predicted it way back in January, saying that this Vlad would have a breakout year, and he did. So the only problem is there are two problems. One's a more obvious problem in the guy who can do everything out in Los Angeles, and Shohei Ohtani. Can pitch well, can hit well, looks great too. Now there's a guy who looks sharp. Anyway, but the other, less obvious, I think, competition for MVP for Vlad might actually be his own teammate in Marcus Semien, who will get some votes as well. So, Karen, I'm going to start with you. This conversation about MVP, where do you go with it?
Yeah, I mean, my own prediction, I think your top three are going to be Ohtani, Guerrero, and Semien. And I said all along during the season that I thought that being a playoff team, assuming the Jays had made the playoffs, would push Vlad over the top in a similar way as to what happened in 2015. Because if you subscribe to wins above replacement being the benchmark, I mean, Josh Donaldson had a phenomenal season. Mike Trout per wins above replacement was that much better. But Josh Donaldson got his team to the playoffs, and Mike Trout got his team to the golf course. Not to knock Mike Trout. That wasn't all his doing by any means. It was the team. But so, I mean, Donaldson won in 2015. I still believe that had the Jays managed to squeak into the playoffs, that Vlad Jr. would be the MVP. Unfortunately, they missed out. I think it's going to be a close race, but I think Ohtani is going to finish first, Vlad second, and Semien third. Right.
And, I mean, I'm just happy that we're having an MVP conversation that doesn't include Mike Trout. I mean, frig. Guys everywhere.
Guy was injured, though, for most of the season.
Well, you know what? Good. It gives everybody else a chance. Not that I wish somebody ill. I don't want him hurt because he's probably the best player that ever played the game. But, I mean, it's nice to give other people a turn, except, your own teammate. But anyway, we got away from the guy. We just didn't get away from the team. Regardless, Steve, over to you. Who is the MVP? Is it Ohtani? Is it Vlad?
It's Vladimir Guerrero. And I apologize for our American and the Canadian listeners. You're going to see an out of sync speaking. That's to allow our people in Japan to catch up with the translation of what I'm saying. But Vladimir Guerrero is the most valuable player. Shohei Ohtani had a historic season. He had a great season both as a pitcher and as a hitter. That does not make him the most valuable player. And since we're talking about Semien had a historic great season. That does not make him the MVP. Vladimir Guerrero Jr., day in, day out, virtually for the entire year, and every player has slumps and everything. So anybody that might be thinking of putting a comment up there saying, oh, but what about Vladdy, for that 4.5 games that didn't get hit, whatever. Everybody has a slump. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. flat out was the most valuable player in baseball, not just the American League, in baseball. So it shouldn't even be a consideration of anyone but Guerrero. But that's not how MVP races come out.
Yeah. I mean, you take Ohtani off the Angels, and they're still a bad team. They're just a bad team with a guy who did something awesome. You take Vlad off the Blue Jays, and they're not a 20-game above 500 team, right? So even if you just simple who is most valuable, Steve, I think you've got a point there. All right, you know what time it is? Oh, Karen has a final point before we.
No, that's just me crossing my fingers for Vlad.
Karen has her fingers
I really
crossed.
don't want to be right about this, Steve. I hope you're right.
All right, so it is the time where we move into our fake Blue Jays news segment. And again, if you're new, you've missed this, I don't know where you've been, but welcome. We throw out some stuff just for entertainment's sake, to make you laugh. It's not real, it's not malicious, it's just good old-fashioned fun. So, Jays from the Couch proudly presents fake Blue Jays news. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Sean. Major League Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred has been making the media rounds during the playoffs, hailing the proposed Tampa Bay-Montreal split season plan set to begin in 2028. Asked Sunday if he felt the other owners would go along, he said, "I think the right arrangement could be approved on the ownership side, and I think with some creativity, it could be approved with the players." Wright said Manfred also said he sees the plan benefiting both communities in Tampa and Montreal and Major League Baseball, but he stressed final resolution as soon as possible so stadium plans can be finalized. The greatest outcome would be the Rays remaining in Florida and the long-awaited return of Major League Baseball to Canada, gushed the commissioner. When Jason from the Couch pointed out to Manfred that there is already a Major League team playing in Canada, the Toronto Blue Jays, that they have been playing there continuously since 1977, Manfred replied, "Are you sure? I have people watch games for me on our wonderful broadcast partners, TBS, ESPN, and Fox, and they have never mentioned that to me. And I personally watch games on the Yes Network whenever I can, and I don't recall ever seeing a Toronto team playing the Yankees." When all the gathered reporters confirmed that the Blue Jays existed, noting they made the playoffs as recently as 2020, Manfred seemed shaken. Good Lord. Though come to think of it, since I became commissioner, I have received a multitude of calls from the 416 area code, which I dismissed as spam calls. And I thought all of the mail from Rogers Communications was just an attempt to get me to change my cell phone provider. Manfred vowed to investigate the matter further and make it a point to visit Toronto and Exhibition Stadium in the near future. The Manfred insult was not the only slight of Toronto baseball making headlines this week. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau vowed to call for a United Nations resolution in support of Vladimir Guerrero Jr. being declared the legitimately elected American League MVP should baseball writers select the Angels' Shohei Ohtani instead. The Canadian Prime Minister declared Guerrero to be the most exciting and talented young player in Major League Baseball today and decried the previous slight to Canadian athletic pride during the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. Canadian sport fans no doubt remember the moment when Team Canada women's softball coach Mark Smith had to pull his team off the field in the fifth inning of a game against Japan and file a protest with the World Baseball Softball Confederation, which was withheld to allow him to make a pitching change. This obvious attempt by Team Japan to influence and advance the medal round, coupled with the performance quality of former Japanese players Munenori Kawasaki and Shun Yamaguchi when they played for the Blue Jays, are deliberate, aggressive actions designed to delegitimize Canadian baseball in the eyes of the world. The proposed resolution would call for Guerrero to be recognized in all United Nations member countries as the legitimate AL MVP and impose sanctions on Japan in the form of forcing them to accept the return of Rafael Dolis to Nippon professional baseball. One last note. The Toronto Blue Jays announced they have added a third team to the list of teams with which they will no longer make trades. Chicago Cubs introduced their new general manager, Carter Hawkins, this afternoon, after which the Jays posted on social media that they would no longer do business with the Cubs. Hawkins came over from the Cleveland Guardians/Indians, where he spent 14 years in a variety of capacities and was immediately promoted to director of baseball operations by Shapiro protege Chris Antonetti upon the departure of Shapiro to Toronto. A similar unspoken business practice went into effect with the Pittsburgh Pirates after former director of baseball operations Ben Sherrington took the helm of the Steel City team and immediately turned a barren farm system into one of the best in baseball in just under 2 years, a feat Cherington did with the Blue Jays during his time in Toronto. You might remember Shapiro and GM Ross Atkins vowed to never again deal with the Cleveland Indians after getting burned in the 2018 trade from Josh Donaldson. Shapiro could not be reached for comment, and as we and all MLB front offices already know, Atkins rarely answers the phone. Over to you, Sean.
I'm taking a minute to get the right said Manfred out of my head.
Well, while you compose yourself, I wonder how many people younger than I am got the right said Manfred reference.
I am so
Younger
proud
than you,
that people
Dad.
picked up on that. I was afraid that was going to just sneak through and nobody would get it.
Oh my God, no, that's all I heard. Anything after that, it's gone. Anyway, continuing with fake Blue Jays news. The MLB award season is coming up, and we spoke with Rob Manfred, commissioner of the Major League Baseball, about his award selections. For MVP, he said, "Man, this is a nightmare. A guy from Japan playing on a crap team and some kid playing in a foreign city. I mean, is Toronto even a city?" When asked about the Cy Young, Rob Manfred had this to say: "I like the year Corey Kluber had in New York. To do what he did coming back from injury at his age?" When asked, "Rob, what about Robbie Ray?" His response, excuse me. Let me say, sorry, I'm still right said Fred. All right, let me try this one again. He said he liked the year Corey Kluber had in New York. Blah, blah, blah. But Rob, what about Robbie Ray? He may have been the best pitcher in the American League this year. To which Rob Manfred replied, "Never heard of him. Does he play in New York?" Moving on from Rob Manfred bashing, just for this week, because I'm sure we'll be back next week with more. I've decided that I'm going to hand out some fake Blue Jays awards. The "Thank God We Don't Pay Him Anymore" award goes to, it's a tie. In these fake awards, you can have ties. It goes to Tanner Roark and Troy Tulowitzki. See you later. The Klingon Award. This award is presented to anyone who managed to cling to a roster spot for longer than anyone can comprehend, and this year's winner is Breivik Valera. The award, the Victim of a Playoff Hopeful Team Award, goes to Anthony Alford and Jonathan Davis. Now, that one, it's not a joke because I really wish that they were still on this team. However, the Having Too Much Fun and Must Not Be Caring About the Game of Baseball award goes to Lourdes Gurriel Jr. Now, he would have been tied with Vlad Jr., but Vladdy gets a pass because he's better at said game. And lastly, Jays from the Couch has discovered some incredible news. We found what is at the end of a rainbow. It's not gold. It's not Shangri-La. Nope. It's a full season from George Springer. And that has been fake.
I think Karen has a fake news thing.
Yeah, I'm too sexy for fake news. I got nothing.
Perfect. All right. Oh man.
Hats off.
Yes, that was amazing. We're at the end of episode 276 of the Jays from the Couch Radio podcast, and I really appreciate everybody tuning in, whether it's on YouTube. Thanks again, Matt. Matt's gone to have a cold shower. And whether it's on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, I really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. It makes us feel really good that we have such a great audience, both on jaysfromthecouch.com, on the aforementioned outlets here as well, and on the audio version as well. Deeply appreciate it. Thank you for a great season. we do this because people enjoy it. So thank you so much. And to Karen and Steve, I owe you both a huge thank you for a great season, for sticking with me the whole season, coming on week after week, doing your own shows. I'm deeply proud to say that you represent Jays from the Couch, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
All right. There we go. So make sure you follow Jays from the Couch on Twitter at Jays from Couch. We're on Facebook, Instagram, everywhere. Look us up. Find the audio version everywhere you find podcasts. And that brings us to the end. So for Karen, for Steve, for Rob Manford, and for Matt Sweeby, my guy, this is Sean Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter at DoyleJFtC. Hoping life gives you a juicy fastball down the middle and you don't miss it. Take care.